Imagine this. It's a nice, sunny Friday morning, March 3rd, 1989, in a quiet, rural part of South Carolina. Our story begins with Justin Lee Turner, a sweet, blonde, blue-eyed boy of just 5 years old. Like any kindergartner, he was getting ready for school. He quickly ate his favorite cinnamon cereal at his home near Monk's Corner, where he lived with his biological father, Victor Turner, and his stepmother, Pamela Turner. Every morning, Justin had the same simple routine. He walked down the dirt road to a neighbor's house, where he would catch the school bus with the other local kids. But on that Friday morning, something went terribly wrong. Justin started his walk, but he never made it to the neighbor's driveway to meet the bus. He simply vanished, somewhere along that short, familiar path between his front door and the bus stop. No struggle, no scream, no clues. Just gone. When the school bus arrived at Whitesville Elementary without Justin, his classmates noticed. They figured he must have just stayed home sick. But when the afternoon came and Justin still wasn't there, the alarm bells started to ring. That evening, around 4:30 or 5 p.m., a neighbor's grandson, who was Justin's best friend and bus buddy, was approached by Pamela Turner. She was asking if anyone had seen Justin. When the friend said Justin hadn't been on the bus that day, Pamela realized the terrible truth. Justin was missing. Pamela immediately called 911. The peaceful quiet of that rural neighborhood was instantly broken as everyone realized this was a serious crisis. The police, specifically Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies, responded quickly. It was early evening when law enforcement and neighbors started searching the area around the Turner property on Horseshoe Road. This was a heavily wooded, rural area. Family, neighbors, and officers fanned out into the surrounding fields and woods, desperately calling Justin's name. Flashlights cut through the darkness as the hours passed, and the worry grew. Was the sweet 5-year-old just lost? Or had he been abducted? In those first frantic hours, they searched everywhere: the house, the yard, inside vehicles, and under the home. They meticulously combed the dense pine forests in a grid pattern and even drained nearby ponds, just in case he had fallen in. Tracking dogs and specialized rescue teams were brought in. Everyone tried to remember. Had Justin ever wandered off before? He had not. Had anyone seen anything unusual that morning? No. In this tight-knit community, no one reported seeing strangers. It was as if Justin had simply disappeared into thin air. By Saturday, the search effort exploded. Over 100 people, deputies, firefighters, police, and volunteers joined the hunt. Fear gripped the Monk's Corner community. Parents kept their kids inside, deeply worried that a child could vanish in daylight broad on a quiet country road. Rumors started to swirl. Did he run away? Was it a custody kidnapping? Or the worst possibility? Had a predator snatched him off the road? As the search went into a second night with no trace of Justin, the case increasingly looked like an abduction. Lead investigators noted how dozens of searchers were on the property all weekend without finding the boy. This raised a troubling question. If Justin was there, how had everyone missed him? If he wasn't there, it meant someone had taken him far away. Justin's family was becoming frantic, clinging to hope. Then, after 2 agonizing days, the search ended with a startling discovery on Sunday morning, March 5th, 1989. Justin's father, Victor Turner, was searching the family's property again alongside investigators. Victor walked up to a travel camper parked right on the Turners' own land, a camper that had supposedly been checked multiple times. Victor pulled open a cabinet door inside the camper and immediately shouted, "Here he is! Here he is!" Other searchers rushed over, Inside a built-in storage compartment of the camper lay the small, lifeless body of Justin Turner. This was every parent's nightmare. The little boy was clearly deceased, curled up as if hidden in a hurry. Victor and others were quickly moved away, and the camper was immediately taped off as a crime scene. The entire community was devastated. The child they had been praying for had been found dead right under their noses. Even more disturbing, evidence at the scene suggested Justin had met a brutal end. Forensic technicians examined the body. Justin had been killed by strangulation and showed signs of sexual assault. An autopsy later confirmed these horrific findings, stating that Justin had died from ligature strangulation, likely with some kind of strap. The autopsy also indicated that Justin died roughly between late morning and early afternoon on March 3rd, meaning he was likely killed within hours of his disappearance that Friday. There was one chilling clue that immediately stuck out. Justin's body felt unusually cold to the touch when recovered, much colder than expected for a body that had been lying at normal temperatures for 2 days. This bizarre detail led investigators to speculate that the killer might have stored Justin's body in a freezer or another cold place to slow decomposition and avoid odor while the intensive search was underway. In fact, during their crime scene sweep of the Turner property, deputies immediately seized a chest freezer to check for any evidence that the body had been stored there. The police collected various potential evidence items from the storage shed and the house, hoping they would find forensic links to the crime. It was very confusing how Justin's body ended up in the camper after so many officers and volunteers had searched it multiple times. Everyone had opened every closet and compartment, or so they thought, and found nothing. Yet by Sunday, the boy's body was clearly there. This led to a chilling idea. Maybe Justin's killer had hidden his body somewhere else during those first 2 days of the frantic search. Then, once the search team started to slow down, the killer snuck the body into the camper. Sheriff's investigators immediately suspected that Justin's body had definitely been moved. The sheriff later confirmed that reports from the search teams showed Justin was not in that spot before. The area inside the camper cabinet had been empty during earlier searches, strongly suggesting that someone with access to the property had later placed Justin's body there. This discovery sent shivers through everyone. If it was true, it meant that Justin's killer was likely among the people who stayed in the area during the search. It also suggested a bold effort to hide the crime right under the noses of the police. Investigators noticed something else strange. Justin's clothes and shoes were remarkably clean. There was no mud, grass, or pine needles on them, despite the rural outdoor setting. This meant Justin probably hadn't been running through the woods or lying exposed outside. Instead, it appeared he had been killed indoors or in a clean area and then carried to the hiding spot in the camper after he was already lifeless. The camper itself was on the Turners' private property and was usually kept locked. Only Victor and Pamela Turner had keys and access to that camper before Justin's body was discovered. All of these facts pointed uncomfortably towards someone inside the family circle being responsible for Justin's death. With the heartbreaking discovery of Justin's body, the missing child case tragically shifted into a homicide investigation. Detectives from Berkeley County, joined by agents from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, started processing the crime scene. They checked for fingerprints, collected hairs and fibers, and seized items like clothing, bedding, and that household freezer for analysis. The search for a stranger who might have abducted him was now replaced by the harsh reality that someone in Justin's own household or social circle had likely committed this horrible crime. Investigators noticed something else strange. Justin's clothes and shoes were remarkably clean. There was no mud, grass, or pine needles on them, despite the rural outdoor setting. This meant Justin probably hadn't been running through the woods or lying exposed outside. Instead, it appeared he had been killed indoors or in a clean area and then carried to the hiding spot in the camper after he was already lifeless. The camper itself was on the Turners' private property and was usually kept locked. Only Victor and Pamela Turner had keys and access to that camper before Justin's body was discovered. All of these facts pointed uncomfortably towards someone inside the family circle being responsible for Justin's death. With the heartbreaking discovery of Justin's body, the missing child case tragically shifted into a homicide investigation. Detectives from Berkeley County, joined by agents from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, started processing the crime scene. They checked for fingerprints, collected hairs and fibers, and seized items like clothing, bedding, and that household freezer for analysis. The search for a stranger who might have abducted him was now replaced by the harsh reality that someone in Justin's own household or social circle had likely committed this horrible crime. Investigators noticed something else strange. Justin's clothes and shoes were remarkably clean. There was no mud, grass, or pine needles on them, despite the rural outdoor setting. This meant Justin probably hadn't been running through the woods or lying exposed outside. Instead, it appeared he had been killed indoors or in a clean area and then carried to the hiding spot in the camper after he was already lifeless. The camper itself was on the Turners' private property and was usually kept locked. Only Victor and Pamela Turner had keys and access to that camper before Justin's body was discovered. All of these facts pointed uncomfortably towards someone inside the family circle being responsible for Justin's death. Victor Turner's discovery of the body also invited deep suspicion. Other searchers were confused by how quickly Victor went straight to the camper cabinet on Sunday. One officer noted that Victor pulled the cabinet right open as if he knew exactly where to look. Some wondered if Victor had received a tip, or if, more darkly, he already knew his son was there. Adding to the strange behavior, right after the body was found, Victor was overheard asking a police officer this strange, incriminating question: what would happen if someone in the family had done this? Investigators noted that Victor's tone was nervous, almost as if he was seeking reassurance or trying to figure out how the law would treat a family member who harmed Justin. Prior searches of the camper had found nothing, yet Victor found Justin within seconds. The deputy who first searched the camper insisted he had been thorough, but when he took a lie detector test about the thoroughness of that search, he failed the polygraph. This confusion fueled theories that maybe no one had actually opened that specific cabinet on day one, or worse, that someone might have interfered with the search. All searchers who had checked the camper were absolutely sure the body was not there initially. The unsettling conclusion was that the killer must have placed Justin's body into the camper after those early searches. This tactic required someone who knew exactly where the search teams were looking and had easy, unsupervised access to the property. By Monday, March 6th, the investigation was focusing intensely on Pamela Turner as the prime suspect. Pamela agreed to take a polygraph test that day, hoping to clear her name, but the results went against her. She failed the lie detector. It was later noted that Pamela had taken a tranquilizer called Valium before the test, which could affect the results, so a second test was scheduled. Before that second attempt could happen, the case took a dramatic turn in the media. The Berkeley County Sheriff publicly announced to reporters that Pamela K. Turner was being considered a suspect in Justin's murder. This announcement infuriated Pamela and her family. Feeling cornered and attacked by the press before any formal charges, Pamela immediately hired an attorney and stopped cooperating with the police. The planned follow-up polygraph was canceled. Despite this setback, the sheriff's office continued building a strong case against the stepmother. Detectives believe that Pamela's lies, her inconsistent accounts, and the sheer impossibility of an outside abductor all pointed strongly to her involvement. However, the detective lamented that DNA evidence would be useless in this case. Finding Victor or Pamela's fingerprints or hair on Justin or in the camper meant nothing unusual because they all lived together. There was no smoking gun, like a distinct foreign fingerprint or unknown DNA profile, everything at the scene could be explained as belonging there under normal circumstances. Thus, investigators were left with a case built on motive, opportunity, and suspicious behavior, rather than definite physical proof. With circumstantial evidence mounting, a Berkeley County grand jury convened in late 1989 to hear the evidence. In December 1989, about 9 months after Justin's death, Pamela Turner was formally charged with homicide in the death of her stepson. She was arrested, booked into jail, and released on a $100,000 bond shortly thereafter. This arrest brought a media frenzy. Many in the community were convinced Pamela had done it, and sentiment ran very high. Pamela insisted she was innocent. She had no history of violence, and taking care of Justin was a normal part of her daily life. Meanwhile, Victor Turner was not charged at that time, but the police still had strong suspicions that he was involved, either in the murder or in helping to cover it up. Investigators believed they didn't have enough proof against Victor, and perhaps they hoped Pamela, if she was guilty, would eventually confess and maybe even talk about Victor's role. But Pamela never broke. Through her lawyer, she denied hurting Justin and pointed out that she had raised him like her own son for several years. The community was sharply divided, and the case was far from a done deal in court. In early 1990, during the initial court hearings, more facts about the crime came out. The medical examiner confirmed that Justin died from strangulation and confirmed the signs of sexual assault. Based on the cereal found in his stomach, the ME estimated Justin died roughly between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on March 3rd. This confirmed that he was killed during the time he was supposed to be walking to school or already there, reinforcing the idea that he never left the area near his home. The strange theory about the body being refrigerated was then challenged. After closer study, forensic analysts determined there was no hard evidence that Justin's body had been artificially chilled. The coldness could simply have been from the cool early spring nights in South Carolina. The chest freezer seized from the Turner house also showed no traces of blood or biological evidence from Justin. The refrigeration theory was eventually dropped. However, one major question remained unanswered. If Pamela or someone in the family killed Justin inside the house that morning, how did they hide the body so effectively for 2 days? The house was searched thoroughly, under beds, in closets, even the attic, and nothing was found. Some police thought Justin might have been temporarily hidden in the storage shed or another car before being moved to the camper when the search slowed down, but they couldn't prove a definitive hiding place. This lack of a clear hiding place made securing a formal accusation very difficult. In mid-1990, prosecutors presented their circumstantial evidence against Pamela Turner to a grand jury, hoping to formally charge her with murder. The result was a huge disappointment for the police. The grand jury refused to indict Pamela, meaning they didn't believe there was enough evidence to send the case to trial. The murder charge against her was officially dropped. Legally, Pamela was free. The case tragically went back to being an unsolved homicide with no one held responsible. The sheriff's office publicly said that Pamela would remain a suspect and that the case was still open. But the investigation had lost its momentum. Pamela, who had shown little reaction when she was first arrested, now quietly slipped out of the public eye. Both Victor and Pamela essentially stopped talking to law enforcement altogether. Investigators noted that just days after failing their lie detector tests in 1989, the Turners had hired an attorney and stopped answering questions. With no active charges, they had less reason to speak. Not long after, the couple moved away from Berkeley County. Pamela even legally changed her first name from Pamela to Megan to distance herself from the bad reputation. Victor and Pamela, now Megan, moved to another county and lived a quiet life for the next few decades. Notably, they never contacted the sheriff's office again to ask about the status of Justin's case. To some police officers, this lack of interest from the parents of a murdered child was highly suspicious. It was a stark contrast to Justin's mother's relatives, who constantly checked in and pushed for the case to stay active. However, Elaine Pace struggled with deep grief. She was frustrated that the case was unsolved, and she strongly believed Pamela knew more than she was saying. Elaine became a vocal advocate for her son, constantly contacting the police and media to remind them that Justin's killer was free. She promised she would never let her son's case be forgotten. Tragically, Elaine did not live to see justice. In 2004, at the age of 47, she passed away after a long illness. For 15 years, she had fought for answers. In her final days, she made her husband Russell promise to continue that fight on her behalf. He committed to fulfilling that dying wish, carrying the torch of justice for Justin even after Elaine was gone. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Justin Turner's case remained technically open, but mostly inactive. However, his extended family, especially on his mother's side, refused to let it rest. They kept Justin's memory alive. The case gained local infamy as a child murder where everyone thought they knew who did it, but no one could prove it. By 2014, on the 25th anniversary of Justin's death, his cousin, Amy Parsons, created a Justice for Justin Lee Turner Facebook page and started organizing efforts to put public pressure on authorities to re-examine the evidence. She reminded the public of the innocent little boy who never got to grow up. Amy told reporters, "Somebody has lived with this for now over 25 years. Come forward. End it now. It's as simple as that." In March 2016, 27 years after the crime, Berkeley County Sheriff Dwayne Lewis publicly announced he was reopening the cold case. Sheriff Lewis assigned a new team to review the case file from scratch. This included re-interviewing old witnesses, examining physical evidence with fresh techniques, and following up on any overlooked leads. The sheriff acknowledged that there were some items in the 1989 case file that he might be able to use with modern forensic testing. That cautious optimism gave the family and supporters new hope. One of the original investigators, now retired, was consulted and remained convinced that the scene had been staged and that the Turners were hiding the truth. In interviews around that time, the retired officer, Wren, was very clear about his suspicions. He found it highly suspicious that no investigator could find the child's body in the camper during the initial search, yet Victor found him so easily. Wren believed that if he had been allowed to continue the case against Pamela back in 1990, he could have built a stronger case. Nevertheless, in 2016, Wren passed all the information to Sheriff Lewis's new cold case unit, hoping they would finally solve what he could not. From 2016 onward, the sheriff's cold case team completely re-examined Justin Turner's murder. The new investigation had a huge advantage, technology that wasn't available in 1989. This included modern DNA profiling, better fiber analysis, and computerized databases. Forensic experts took a fresh look at all the physical evidence saved in the case: clothing, hair samples, and the suspected murder weapon. The police also digitized and reviewed all the old witness interviews and police reports. Sometimes, after decades, people are more willing to talk, and indeed, a few new tips came in. By 2020, over 30 years after Justin's death, Sheriff Lewis announced that the cold case team was actively following some very promising new information. One crucial piece of evidence the team focused on was the ligature used to strangle Justin. Back in 1989, police noted a strap was likely used, and a dog leash had been taken from the Turner home as a possible item of interest. Using modern forensic fiber analysis, the police made a major breakthrough. They discovered that tiny fibers from that leash, or a similar strap in the home, matched fibers embedded in the neck wounds on Justin's body and on his shirt collar. Finally, they had found a forensic link tying an object from the Turner household directly to the murder. Sheriff Lewis stated that this breakthrough came because of persistent testing and new forensic medicine. Investigators felt this was the missing piece of proof that had stopped them decades earlier. The reopened case also reinforced facts that were already known, but now held much greater importance. For example, Justin's body and clothing lacked any dirt, suggesting he was carried to the camper. Also, the very specific hidden cabinet where the body was concealed showed the killer knew that camper's layout perfectly. This was not a spot a random person would choose. It was someone comfortable on the property. According to court documents, Victor and Pamela Turner were the only people with regular access to that camper before the discovery. All signs still pointed inside the home. By April 2021, the cold case team felt they had enough evidence to make an arrest. They gathered all their findings, the fiber analysis, the old lies told by the Turners, and the suspicious discovery, into a case file for the prosecutors. The sheriff was confident, stating that they had recovered what they believed to be the evidence of the murder because of new technology and forensic science. The stage was set to finally hold someone responsible for the crime that had haunted the community for over 30 years. On January 9, 2024, Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies made the move that Justin's family had waited for. They arrested both Justin's stepmother, 66-year-old Megan Pamela Turner, who had legally changed her name, and his father, 68-year-old Victor Turner. Each was charged with 1 count of murder. The arrests happened quietly at their home in Cross Hill, South Carolina. The news was huge, making headlines across the state. The 34-year-old cold case had finally led to charges, and against the very people many had long suspected. The sheriff held a press conference, highlighting the key new finding, the fiber match linking an object from their home to Justin's body. Authorities also brought up the strange behavior from 1989 that now looked worse when combined with the forensic evidence. They noted that Victor found the body in the camper within moments of entering, an eerie moment that was actually caught on video by a news crew at the time, which suggested he had prior knowledge of the location. They reminded the public of Victor and Pamela's lies during the initial investigation, such as the false bus story. One particularly strong piece of information was that multiple witnesses from 1989 had recalled incriminating statements from the Turners. For example, at least one neighbor remembered Pamela making a disturbing comment implying she had a big fight with Justin that she won. Another witness remembered one of the Turners asking hypothetically what would happen if a family member versus an outsider was responsible, suggesting the Turners were trying to figure out how much suspicion was on them. Prosecutors believed all these pieces established probable cause that Victor and Pamela were jointly involved in Justin's murder. After their arrests, Victor and Megan Turner were transported back to Berkeley County to face the charges. Both were released on a $50,000 bond each, a relatively low amount given the severity of the charge. Their bond conditions mandated they surrender their passports and, most importantly, have no contact with Justin's maternal family. Justin's relatives were furious that the people they believed responsible were free again, and tensions were extremely high. Justin's cousin, Amy Parsons, expressed a mix of relief and resolve. She stated they would not rest until there was a conviction. Amy posted a fiery statement online addressing the Turners directly. For 30 years, you enjoyed your freedom. You were supposed to take care of him, love him, and instead, you tortured, abused, and murdered your own child. I hope you never see life outside of prison walls. Despite the confidence of law enforcement, the case against the Turners was still largely circumstantial. Even in 2024, there was no direct DNA evidence linking them to the act, which was unsurprising since they lived with the victim. The prosecution was relying on the new fiber evidence, the suspicious conduct, and the alleged statements. The Turners' defense attorneys immediately fought back. By March 2024, their lawyer filed motions to dismiss the charges. During a March 2024 hearing, the defense dropped a bombshell theory. They suggested that the real culprit might have been a convicted serial killer named Richard Mark Ivanowitz, not Victor or Megan Turner. This claim introduced a dramatic twist. Richard Mark Ivanowitz was indeed a serial killer who had abducted and murdered girls in Virginia and died by suicide in 2002. Crucially, Ivanowitz had been a U.S. Navy sailor stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, only about 30 miles from Monk's Corner in 1989. The defense argued that Ivanowicz's methods, kidnapping, strangling, and sexual assault, were similar to Justin Turner's case. If Ivanowicz were involved, it could explain some aspects of the crime, perhaps suggesting an external predator who hid the body to frame the family. Furthermore, because Ivanowicz was cremated, no DNA comparison could be made to either include or exclude him, making it harder for the Turners to definitively prove someone else did it. At the March hearing, the prosecutors were somewhat surprised by this theory about the alternate killer, Ivanowicz. One prosecutor admitted this is pretty explosive evidence and asked the judge for more time to investigate the claim and build it into their case analysis. The judge agreed that such significant information required careful consideration. He delayed any immediate ruling on the defense's request to dismiss the case, putting the brakes on the trial to allow both sides to dig deeper into the Ivanowicz possibility. Meanwhile, prosecutors fought back by highlighting the physical evidence they did have. They pointed out that a dog leash found in the Turner home in 1989 was believed to be the strangulation weapon. However, medical experts had debated whether that leash alone could have caused the specific marks on Justin's neck. Some experts thought the width of the mark suggested a dog collar used along with the leash. Since the Turners had a dog in 1989, a matching collar would logically have been nearby. Investigators looked for the old collar but couldn't find it. In a shocking move, they even dug up the remains of the Turners' long-deceased pet dog to see if the collar was buried with it, but they found nothing. The defense used this to argue that the police were changing their story and that crucial evidence, like the collar, was now missing, which was unfair to the Turners. Throughout the spring of 2024, as legal battles continued, Justin's family prepared themselves for either justice or another bitter disappointment. They had faith in the new sheriff, but the defense was clearly trying hard to destroy the case. Outside the courtroom, emotions ran high. One family member was quoted saying, "It's just hard to believe that the person who did it can live their life for 35 years knowing and thinking that they got away with it." This reflected their deep belief that the Turners had been essentially getting away with murder for decades. In June 2024, the case of South Carolina versus Victor Turner and Megan Turner took a dramatic and final turn. On June 7th, Judge Roger Young issued his decision on the defense's request to dismiss the charges. And it was a decision that stunned Justin's family and the police. The judge granted the motion and threw out the murder charges against Victor and Megan Turner. Judge Young cited fundamental issues of fairness and a lack of new evidence. He noted that the prosecution had not presented any truly new evidence, only new interpretations of old evidence. The fiber analysis, while new in technique, was based on items available since 1989. The judge saw the case revival as simply a second attempt using old facts, which troubled him. Lost evidence and dead witnesses. Most importantly, Judge Young pointed out the huge problem of lost evidence and unavailable witnesses. By 2024, more than 20 potential witnesses were dead or unable to testify. This included key neighbors and possibly the medical examiner. The defense argued, and the judge agreed, that this severely limited the Turners' ability to defend themselves fairly. A trial would have relied on old, recorded statements without the live witnesses being cross-examined, which the judge called inherently unfair to the defense. The judge's ruling explained his reasons in detail. 1. No truly new evidence. He noted that the prosecution had not presented any truly new evidence, only new interpretations of old evidence. The fiber analysis, while new in technique, was based on items available since 1989. The judge saw the case revival as simply a second attempt using old facts, which troubled him. 2. Lost evidence and dead witnesses. Most importantly, Judge Young pointed out the huge problem of lost evidence and unavailable witnesses. By 2024, more than 20 potential witnesses were dead or unable to testify. This included key neighbors and possibly the medical examiner. The defense argued, and the judge agreed, that this severely limited the Turners' ability to defend themselves fairly. A trial would have relied on old, recorded statements without the live witnesses being cross-examined, which the judge called inherently unfair to the defense. 3. Investigative missteps. The judge also pointed to errors made by the original detectives in 1989 in preserving evidence. He emphasized that you cannot conduct a 21st-century trial based on a 20th-century investigation without running into these problems. He specifically noted that the delay in charging Victor until 2024 was unjust if the state suspected him years ago. Finally, Judge Young took the unusual step of barring prosecutors from ever charging Victor or Megan Turner again in connection with Justin's murder. This dismissal was with prejudice, meaning the case is legally closed unless the decision is successfully appealed. He reasoned that it would simply be impossible to guarantee a fair trial under any circumstances now. This decision meant that in the eyes of the law, Victor and Megan Turner are cleared of the murder and will not face another trial for it. The reaction to this outcome was intensely emotional. The Turners, now officially free, spoke out publicly for the first time in decades. Megan Turner said that living under suspicion for 35 years, it's been a living hell. She described how she had to change her name and try to hide from the public's shame, always fearing someone would recognize her. Megan claimed that from the very beginning the police had targeted her and Victor. Everything went so wrong with the investigation, she said sadly. If we said anything, they tried to turn it against us. Victor Turner, while relieved that the legal nightmare was over, expressed bitterness. He felt that because the police focused so intensely on the family early on, they failed to investigate other leads that might have caught the real killer. We really won't ever know too much about what happened, he said. The Turners maintained their innocence, as they always had. Victor said he was glad he could hold his head up a little bit now, but added that the pain of losing Justin never went away. On the other side, Justin's surviving family members were heartbroken and furious. The family released a statement through the prosecutor's office that was very strong. Today, our justice system failed an innocent 5-year-old boy. The ones responsible for Justin's death had the chance to face justice here, but instead chose to stay silent and will face the final justice handed out by God for eternity. They thanked the sheriff and his team for fighting, but expressed deep disappointment that legal technicalities stopped a jury from hearing the case. To them, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The family promised, "My fight for Justin will never stop." The prosecutor, Scarlett Wilson, also released a thoughtful statement. She acknowledged the outcome, noting that while the warrants against the Turners were supported by probable cause, meaning the police had good reason to arrest them, the judge's ruling highlighted the harsh reality of prosecuting a decades-old case. She admitted that mistakes made 35 years ago could not be fixed now, such as lost evidence and limitations of old forensic work. She agreed that the state would not appeal the judge's decision. It was a sad admission that sometimes justice cannot be achieved after such a long time, even when everyone tries their best. Sheriff Dwayne Lewis, who had put years into reopening the case, voiced his own disappointment. This is not the outcome we were seeking, but he respected the court's ruling. It was an unfortunate reality that the passage of time had essentially protected the suspects from being convicted. In interviews after the dismissal, Victor Turner sounded defensive and accusatory. He suggested that law enforcement failed us at the beginning. Victor implied that he and Pamela were innocent and were victims of the police's tunnel vision. It was a painful irony. The man whom Justin's other family members believed was responsible was now blaming the police for not finding the real killer. Thus, in a startling reversal, Victor and Megan Turner walked free, legally cleared and immune from further prosecution in Justin's case. The long, cold case was effectively closed without an outcome that satisfied everyone. Officially, the murder of Justin Lee Turner remains unsolved. There is no convicted killer. Unofficially, however, many in the community and Justin's family feel they know exactly who got away with murder. For Justin's family, the decades-long journey has been a roller coaster of hope and heartbreak. The outcome in 2024 was not the justice they wanted. They find some comfort in believing that ultimate justice lies in higher hands. In the meantime, Justin's relatives continue to honor his memory. His cousin, Amy Parsons, who was only 8 when Justin was killed, became the family spokesperson. She led the Justice for Justin social media movement and never stopped pushing for answers. The saddest part for the family is that Justin's mother, Elaine Pace, did not live to see even the brief moment when charges were brought. Her unwavering fight, spending 15 years pushing for answers, is remembered as a testament to a mother's endless love. Her persistence did help lead to the case being reopened, thanks to the family's continued efforts in her absence. The community of Monk's Corner also felt the lasting impact. What happened to Justin in 1989 changed local parenting forever. The trauma of a child being murdered in their neighborhood, possibly by someone they knew, was lasting. Even after the Turners' charges were dropped, many locals remained convinced of their guilt. There is a lingering sense that a little boy was failed, perhaps by his guardians and then by the system meant to deliver justice. Yet, Justin Lee Turner's short life continues to be remembered. He was laid to rest not far from his mother, Elaine's grave. At his funeral, over 200 mourners came to say goodbye. The small casket was surrounded by some of Justin's favorite toys, tokens of the childhood that was stolen. Instead of celebrating graduations and milestones, Justin's family only has a frozen memory of a forever 5-year-old boy who loved to play and laugh. Even today, more than 36 years later, flowers and toys are often left at Justin's grave. His childhood friend, Justin Smith, the boy who waited for him at the bus stop that fateful morning, has a tattoo of Justin Turner's face on his calf, a permanent tribute to his lost friend. Whether justice was truly served is a matter of perspective. For the Turners, justice meant being cleared after decades of suspicion. For Justin's family, justice meant a conviction that never materialized. What remains certain is the tragic loss of a beautiful young life. Justin Lee Turner's story stands as a sobering example of how a case can haunt a family and a community for generations. It underscores the importance of a meticulous, modern investigation from the very first day. Though the legal case is closed, the cold case of Justin Turner will forever live on in the hearts of the little boy with the shy smile, and his family will continue to seek the truth in his honor.